Let some folks arrive. Hello to you, those of you arriving. Thank you. Give it just another minute or slightly less, and then we'll get started. Right. All right, good evening, and welcome. Welcome to Cold Read Festival of New Plays, Syracuse Stage. Welcome to Cold Open, again for the 2021 Cold Read Festival of New Plays here, at least virtually, at Syracuse Stage. I am Kyle Bass, the Associate Artistic Director and the Curator of the Cold Read Festival. I'm also joined this evening by my partner in crime, Bob Hupp. Bob, how are you this evening?
I am very well, Kyle. Thank you for asking. And
Good
welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining.
Yes, hello, 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 hello. So we just have some thank yous to make, a few important words to say, and then I'm going to introduce our artist, our cold read artist. And Bob, I'm going to hand it over to you to say some thank yous for us.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure to thank the sponsors of the Cold Read Festival of New Plays. Those sponsors include Raymore and Flanagan, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Dorothy and Marshall M. Reisman Foundation, and symposium sponsor is Syracuse University's Humanities Center Symposium Futures. It's also important that I tell you right now, the Syracuse Stage stands firmly against racism and discrimination. We pledge to stand with underrepresented and oppressed communities and to advance anti-racism in all aspects of our work, including the outward-facing public dimension of our creative endeavors and the less visible internal practices of the organization.
Thank you, Bob. And I will add that Syracuse Stage respectfully acknowledges the Onondaga Nation, firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral lands we now stand. Thank you. So thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited. This really sort of gets our festival kicked off. We had a really good conversation last night that was part of the Syracuse University Humanities Symposium Futures. But tonight, the focus will be on the work of the artists of the festival. And I have a list of questions, and we will move through. You can, those of you in attendance, you can put your questions in the Q&A area. Also, the chat is open for you to do that as well. And I want to remind you that the events of Cold Read are exciting, and they are under consideration, which is the reading of a new play called Queen. Also, right here will be the presentation of a reading by a play of our Right Here artist, and that's Evan's Starling-Davis. And then we also have solo act, and that will be the presentation of new work from our solo artist in residence in collaboration with Faye Chiao, and that's Chesney Snow, and also Draft Pages, which will be the presentation of the reading of our playwright in residence for the festival, and that's Kate Hamill. And speaking of Kate Hamill, I wanted to introduce all of our artists, and I'll start with Kate. Kate Hamill is an actor, playwright, Wall Street Journal's Playwright of the Year for 2017, and one of the most produced playwrights nationwide for 3 seasons running, 2017, 2020. Her plays include Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Vanity Fair, Mansfield Park, Little Women, Dracula, and Emma, and Scarlet Letter. She is currently developing a new adaptation of The Odyssey for ART, a Christmas play called Scrooge for Senate, several original plays, including Prostitute Play, The Party, The Piper, which will be featured here later this week. And she has a made-for-Zoom play called Badass Gal Boss Power Hour, which will premiere with primary stages in the spring. Kate, lovely to see you again.
Lovely to be here. Hi.
Yes, indeed. Also with us is Chesney Snow. He is our solo artist in residence. Chesney is a drama desk winner and a 3-time artist in residence at Harvard University. Most recently, he wrote and appeared in Soil Beneath, an Empirical Decay for Primary Stages off Broadway and Two River Theater's production of Obladi. And he's composer and lyricist for the MacArthur Theater and Long Wharf Theater's 2008 Crowns. He's critically acclaimed choreo poem, The Unwritten Law, premiered at Dixon Place in New York in 2017. A pioneering figure in American beatbox culture. He originated the role of Boxman at Primary Stages and on Broadway, and in transit at Circle in the Square. Chesney headlined Carnegie Hall twice with Distinguished Concerts International, produced and starred in the musical documentary American Beatbox, which was placed in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and numerous other achievements throughout the United States. Chesney, hello, my brother.
Great to be here, brother. Honored to be here with all these beautiful, amazing artists. So thank you for having me.
And also, I want to introduce Faye Chiao, who is Chesney's collaborator on his piece. Faye is a composer and a performer of musical theater, opera, and concert music. Faye has been honored with awards from the Presser Foundation, the Puffin Foundation, Opera of America. She has been an artist in residence at the New Victory Lab Works. I'm just gonna get my thing going here. The John Duffy Institute for New Opera at the Virginia Arts Festival and Boston Chamber Symphony. She has received residencies at Barrington Stage Company, the Malay Arts, also in Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Her work has been commissioned by Kenyon College, Prospect Theater, Single Carrot Theater, Hear Her Song, Houston Grand Opera, Pittsburgh Festival Opera, and the 24-hour musical. Coming up, her opera Island of the Moon, written with playwright Anton Dudley, I know him, will receive a workshop with the Duffy Institute, and for new opera, and her musical Fountain of You, written with playwright Tasha Gordon-Salmon, will receive a workshop with Zydus Theater, and she is excited to be virtually at Syracuse Stage developing this new performance piece with Chesney. Faye, hello, good to see you. And last, and certainly not least, our right here featured playwright, Evan Starling-Davis, is a New York-based narrative artist, producer, and curator, excavating the everyday stories pushed beneath the margins of our society. As a digital age, Black and queer Afro diasporic griot, Evan's work reaches the hard facts, personal truths, and the surreal realities we bury ourselves in, and his interdisciplinary projects have been featured in numerous galleries, museums, and theaters internationally. Evan, thank you for being here and part of Cold Read family. So good to see you.
Really good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to see you, good to see you. And before we move on, I also want to make sure that I thank Kate Lastly, who is in control of all things webinar. Thank you for your work. All right, so this evening is about you guys talking about what you'll be doing, your featured work, right? So I have some questions, and I'm sort of gonna lay them on you. And but I want to start by just asking about sort of your work in general. Who are you, I suppose, as a playwright, as a theater maker? Who are you? Let's, Kate, because you're in the middle of my screen looking at me with bright eyes.
With terror in my eyes.
Terror in your bright eyes.
Yeah, I feel like who are you is the question we ask ourselves every morning. I'm local-ish to Syracuse. I'm originally from upstate New York. a small town called Lansing in the Finger Lakes off of Lake Cayuga. I got my BFA in acting from Ithaca College, which is a hop, skip, and a jump down the road. And one of my brothers actually went to Syracuse University. And I moved to the city, and I started out as just an actor, and I was doing okay. I was working and, sort of living that lifestyle, and it was okay, but I was getting swiftly frustrated with the dearth of, this was around 2008, 2009, so the theater landscape was different, and even film and TV was different, but how often I was auditioning for things that were like bikini girlfriend number 3, or tertiary female character number 4 in stories, and it was often being asked to do sort of a cardboard cutout of a woman in what was a very male gazy story. And I'm a feminist, and I've been that way. I've been a self-identified feminist since before I was even in theater, and so I had a real crisis of identity. And I had been writing for my day job and always dabbled with it. And I was like, I really want there to be a feminist, female-centered work, and I really wanted it in the theater. And I especially wanted it in the classics, because the classics are cultural touchstones. They are what stories we tell, and classics, they are stories we tell about ourselves. If I say to you, he's a Macbeth, we will have a common understanding of what that is. But when those stories are so often looking a certain way, and I was very frustrated, so I bet my friend $100 I could write a new feminist classic. And at the time I was really poor, so $100 meant, like, if I had to give her that check, I would be living off of ramen. And that was my first play, and that was in 2014, and that was an adaptation of Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility. And much to my shock, that became a whole hybrid playwriting career. And I do new plays and new musicals as well, but a lot of it has been adapting the classics from a feminist, female-centered, radical adaptation, highly theatrical, inclusive point of view. This is my third Zoom today, so I'm a little like, I apologize up front.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Thank you. And you, Chesney, please, sort of that same question, who are you? How do you come to playwriting and theater making?
So who am I? Wow, that's such a it's so crazy how interesting it is when you really are forced to answer that question. I guess I'd like to start by saying I am I'm a son, I'm an uncle, I'm a brother, I am I'm a father, I'm a son, that's first and foremost who I am. But in terms of how I came to writing, because, I used to write songs for like pop stars in Europe, and I started writing when I saw Trayvon Martin's Murderer Go Free. It was right around that time that I said that I'd always wanted to write something, and I wanted to write the story of my family's life, and that's when the idea started to kind of come to me, because I wanted to do something with my art and with my craft outside of entertaining, because I felt at that time I was traveling the world. I was doing shows and hearing the applause, and that was great. But there was something empty in me, and I knew that I needed to fill that with my purpose in theater. So most of the work that I do in theater is I try to follow in that. So that's that's how I came to theater. I used theater as a tool for social change. You know, we've whether we're street performing with kids to you know, deal with HIV and AIDS or poverty or violence. I'm always trying to figure out how do we use theater as a means of social change.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose. Eben, who are you? How do you come to playwriting, theater making?
You know, I thought that question was going to be easier after I heard these two do it before me, but it's not. I feel like who I am changes every year, probably like every year.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm a student at Syracuse University. I'm getting a doctoral degree, but at the very core of my heart, I'm a storyteller. And I see it as using different modes of storytelling to just get my perspective and my voice out there. So I use theater to kind of maximize that. I started writing plays. We were just in the Zoom earlier, and I was talking about how my high school here in Syracuse, from Syracuse, I probably should say that. I went to high school here, and my family and friends and all of my inner circle are from here. But Syracuse had a partnership with the Syracuse City School District to do these playwriting kind of like camps. And at Nottingham, we had overnight playwrights. And I started writing my parents' divorce story there. And then that play went on to Syracuse Stage, part of the Young Playwrights Festival back in 2009. And I've been writing ever since. I got trained at SUNY Purchase. And then I took a hiatus. I took like 5 to 7 years off in between and just traveled, tried to experience life, and then moved back to do community work here. So I teach literacy workshops, poetry, playwriting, creative essay writing to local K through 12 students here in Syracuse, which is why I decided to go to school for the literacy degree. But also I've been teaching playwriting workshopping at Syracuse Stage through the educational department as well.
All right, thank you, thank you. And Faye, also, who are you, and what brings you to the theater and things, theater and music?
Thanks, Kyle. I kind of just want to hear everybody else talk. Everyone's story is so amazing. I consider myself a musical storyteller. I sort of grew up in, maybe the story is this. I'm like, what is this story? The story is this. When I was little, I was hearing sounds in my head, maybe the way that some people hear voices in their head. I'm not sure, but it was very clear. And what I wanted was like a machine that would just sort of like take it out. And I didn't realize that that machine is years of work in developing your craft and really finding your voice and the way to sort of say the things you want to say. And what is it that I want to say? I think I consider myself someone who funnels rage into joy. So I am very interested in stories of women. I'm very interested in stories of women of color. I'm very interested in stories that haven't been told in the voice that they need to be told. And so that's what I do. I think I am drawn to stories, and I bring my musical sensibility and training and hope to amplify those stories, which is why I'm so honored to be here today. The other thing I am is somebody who's very interested in making things better for especially women of color coming up, which is why I have to jump to another Zoom. I am so sorry to leave you all, but thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here, and you all are brilliant. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. So the question I have is about your work in this festival, and I'm going to start with you, Chesney. So what have you been working on? What piece do you have you brought to the festival? What ignited it? What's the idea? When did you begin the work? And what is it? What is it called? What is it now?
So right now we're still dealing with the working title. Faye and I are tossing between Upstream or Mookie Upstream. But the idea is it takes place in this aquaplane, and the aquaplane is this dimension that is a place between where the balance of life and death are, right? And that's where we find Mookie. So this is a piece of readers theater, starting out as readers theater, and but it's done with music, right? So it's readers theater set to music, verse by verse, and it's we came to this piece because I wanted to tell a story about I wanted to tell a story about a young girl, and like I was talking about in the last session, right before COVID hit, I had this experience where I was doing my regular workshop tours that I do at this elementary school in Janesville, Wisconsin, and I got to the class and I go into the class. My workshop's kindness is my superpower, right? That's my workshop. And I'm like, how's everybody feeling today? And everybody's like, good. And this one little girl is like, terrible, right? And so I say, well, I hope by the end of this workshop that, you're able to feel a little bit better. And so we do my beatboxing workshop with this group. She's about 9 years old, right? And so she smiles, she's having a good time, and I feel like, wow, like she I did my job, right? She's good. Well, at the end of the day, I do a performance for the kids, and they come up, they want to get your autograph, and so she walks up to me and hands me a picture of her mother and says, my mother was murdered 2 days ago. Would you please sign this for me? And so it stopped me, right, cold. And, it was like, before I went to that school, I was feeling really bad, like, because things in my life were kind of going a little crazy. And I was just really confused. And it was like, at that moment, I knew what my purpose really was, Sorry about that. That's my mama. But I knew what my purpose was. And so I said, I want to write stories for them. And that's where it started from. Yeah.
That's really.
I hope I'm not taking up too much time because I can.
No, that's an amazing story. That's an amazing start. Reason to begin something.
Yeah.
And we're going to circle back, and we'll hear more about what you're working on as well.
Yeah.
Evan, that same question. Your work for the festival. Sort of, what is its history? What ignited it? What was the idea? Where did it begin? You hear me, Evan?
I did. Chesney, can you mute? I think you're still.
I'm sorry.
The question is, what the work for the festival, Evan, what's its history? What ignited it? What was the idea? How did it begin?
Yeah, you kind of broke up in there, but I think I got the gist of it. I'm also looking at the email, so I'll keep looking over and back. So this play, Madness in the Clearing of Blue, it started as a response to the things that were happening in Syracuse. So I mentioned before, I'm from Syracuse. I have a lot of siblings here, and I think it was either 2 summers back or 3 summers. Everything's blurry now with COVID, but there was a really long stretch of gun-related violence that happened in the city, and collectively, my siblings had lost up to like 14 friends due to gun violence. It was a lot just for them to process, and I started writing poetry for them, and the play kind of happened after I workshopped those poems and put them into kind of a play format and started to tell a story that way. So that's kind of like how it started. Fast forward 2 years later, me being in this this really heavy scholarship like environment right now, getting a master's degree in curation and museum studies, and doing my doctoral training in literacy education. I've been reading a lot of theoretical work. And I came across Afro-Surrealism and Futurism and like solar punk and cyberpunk and all of these really cool things that envisions our people, and I say our Black people, in the future, and in the future without the restrictions that we're living in and without those obstacles and like boundaries now. So this play, it really takes a lens and puts it under our microscopes and just really gives a truthful like telling of a family living in Syracuse that's dealing with this issue of gun violence. But it's also a really magical piece because it has these moments of like really heavy poetics and like soliloquies and asides and all of these poems that kind of thread throughout of it through kind of like this spiritual ancestral thing. So yeah, it's a balance of like realism and it's a balance of the surreal and doing that all in the landscape of Syracuse.
Great. And it's so great to have that piece in this festival and to have that piece in this right here in a position because of its focus on Syracuse. Kate, the Piper, where in the hell did you get that idea?
Yeah, so I had been circling writing this play for a while. Two periods in my 20s, not to say I'm out of my 20s, but I am. 2 periods in my 20s, I had been involved in situations where I was news like toxic male leaders. Like one of them was a teacher of mine, an independent acting teacher who I took class with, and one of them was someone who I worked with. And in both of those scenarios, these guys were like leaders of these groups, and they were surrounded by a very cultish atmosphere, and often the class was full of women and the work environment was full of women, and it was a very skewed power dynamic. And it turns out that both of these guys turned out to be bad guys, and I, Captain Feminism, did not see the red flags. And when it happens to you once, you're like, wow, that sucked, that happened to me. When it happens to you twice, I had to confront something in myself that made me vulnerable to a certain kind of leadership and made me ignore certain red flags. And examining that in myself made me very sympathetic to cult thinking and people who get sucked into cults. So I started doing a lot of research into it, and I knew I wanted to do a play about a cult, but I could not break into it. And then I thought, especially in the age of Trump, I thought, well, why does this keep happening? And I thought, what if I break it out into this metaphysical fairy tale world that's about the archetype of the Pied Piper, a charismatic leader that literally leads you into a magical mountain kingdom, and then it closes behind you and nobody ever sees you again. So this is a mix of, it's a kind of horror play about a woman who is in a period of transition. She's a little bit lost in her life, and she gets sucked into feeling like she's belonging into this group that's primarily women under this very charismatic leader of this cult, a yoga cult, because I took a lot of yoga back in the day, and that's a guru. Yoga has a lot of gurus and has a lot of issues with this, so I was familiar with it. And interspersed with it on another level, something very deep is happening. Maybe this cult leader has, is the Pied Piper. We don't know. So it's a very creepy play.
It's very exciting to have it. Very exciting to have it here. So I want to just talk to you guys a little bit about your process, right? And so one of the ideas behind Cold Read is that it's about process. Obviously, it's been different this time. It's a virtual event. In normal times, everyone would be here with us in Syracuse for the week. The playwrights would be partnered with the director, and they'd be in conversation and consultation and and brainstorming, and the playwright would be writing. Sometimes playwrights would show up and they've got no pages, and by the time it comes time to show up this stuff, they had 60 or 70 pages, or they come with 10 pages, or they come with a play. It's always been about process, right? And as you all know, that you did that work last week, you did all your rehearsals and your captures last week, so that those pieces could be ready to be shown this week. And they will be streaming on their days for those days. And then there will be the live talkbacks. The talkbacks will be live in the same format. And for those of you who are viewing and with us tonight, please go to SyracuseStage.org to look at the schedule of events and get your information there, and to get your pass for the festival. But I want to talk about your process for the work, and what that was like. How did you approach rehearsals? What did you do revisions? How did the work change, grow? What did you revise if you did? Can you talk about that? Evan, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. So one, I should just give a disclaimer. I'm a very busy student right now. They have me running through a lot of hula hoops up on the hill, but I'm appreciative. So to say the least, I'm really happy that it was handed off to a very beautiful director, Rufus Bonds, because he's to find someone who gets the rhythm of the language that you're writing, and to find someone who sees the music in the poetry that you're writing was just a really lovely experience. And that first rehearsal process was weird because it's Zoom, and theater is just weird when you're not in front of each other. But he was really engaged with the movement of the piece and what that movement of the piece looked like behind the screen, which I really appreciated it, and led me into revisions of thinking about language as something that moves, and how does that physicality of sound and of words kind of like transcend the platform that we're viewing it in. So yeah, the rehearsal process for me, as always, when it gets into actors' hands, I think that's when I'm able to really hear the work. And this is the second cast that's kind of like had their hands like on this piece. The first time was 2 years ago, so it's been a really long time since the play was heard on my end. But that sits well with me because it's a timely piece, unfortunately, dealing with gun violence, but it's still there. There's still something that people relate to. And I think that's really good for me as a writer to just know that and be secure with that. And how can I just refine that?
Thank you. Kate, that same question for you. What was your process? How did you work with rehearsals? How did you engage with your director?
Yeah, like Evan, I wrote this play right after like the height. I mean, we're still in this movement, but the height of the Me Too movement. I wrote it in about 6 days because I was angry. So I wrote this play really fast, and then I have not heard a reading of this play since 2019. And sometimes when you go away from a play for a couple of years, it really helps because you can kind of get a remove, you can approach it like it's someone else's work. And I was working with my brilliant friend, Meredith McDonough, who was supposed to direct the world premiere of my Emma at the Guthrie when literally everything closed down when we were in Minneapolis. So we lived in, very graciously, the Guthrie let us stay in their housing. We lived in Minneapolis in the height of the pandemic together for like 2 months. So Meredith and I are very tight, and she's sort of a new play genius. So it was really helpful. I'm someone who always overwrites my new plays and then cuts down. So I was able to cut about 5 pages. And again, I was able to have more distance. So I was able to, we switched a track of one of the actors, and we had a really crackerjack team of actors. And like Evan, when I have great actors, then when something isn't quite working, it's on me, and I know that that is a structural flaw because I really trust the artists who are handling things. And yeah, the nice thing about Zoom, particularly for this play, is the Piper has a lot of direct address, and Zoom is extremely intimate. So, my husband, Jason O'Connell, who is a Syracuse stage a friend of Syracuse stage, has it is in this piece. He's playing the Piper. He's playing like basically the devil. Don't ask me why I cast my husband the devil. It's a long story, but he can get right in there and talk to you watching it on screen. And the hope is that that is utilizing this new form in a good way. And again, just to echo Evan, like it the frustration is you're like, oh man, no, I wish we could go into production. You know, there is something about the 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 minute when a reading is like getting really interesting where you're like, yeah, no, I want to stage it, and that is just the inherent sort of stop and start of Zoom theater at the moment. But it also does have benefits, and that's one of the benefits. And the other thing is you don't like you can really just focus on the language because that's what you at least with my piece it would be so complicated to stage. You're not going to have like actors, you know, doing blocking in their house. We could just focus on the words, and that was really helpful.
Good. So what, as you know, part of the experience for our audience is to be able to engage with the playwright, the director, in some cases, some cast members about the work they would have streamed, right? So, and as I've said, the talkbacks will be live in this format at 8:30 on the evening of the day that your work streams. So please, again, check the schedule at syracusestage.org. So I want to talk to you about your experience with talkbacks and just what you hope to get from them. How are they most useful to you? Do you have, as a player, I have rules for my talkbacks. Do you have rules for your talkbacks? So yes, anything related to how you then receive you know, the response from an audience on work you're still working on. Evan, what do you think?
I can start off. One, I'm just learning to be more comfortable talking. So I love a talk back because it just, you know, it allows me to get to know the people who visit those spaces. And I think there's something beautiful about building community in that way because after a show, you don't really get a chance to like, it's all hectic and things like that. So you don't get a chance to really like dive into a piece, but the talk back kind of like presents that. So I'm appreciative of that. I don't know if I have rules. I know I don't like people trying to rewrite a script in a talkback for me. But I feel like opinions, I appreciate opinions just because I appreciate the complexity of humans. So like I think everything I can find something valuable from it as long as it's not trying to just retell the story that I'm trying to tell. If that makes any sense.
Yes, absolutely it does. Kate, from your point of view.
Yeah, I like a talkback similarly because I do feel like it, as Evan was saying, it is so few places in our current life are we in sort of completely uncurated spaces right now. You know, like often when you're walking into a room, you know like sort of what room you're walking into, and in a talkback anyone can say anything to you and sometimes they do, and I kind of like it because I feel like, well, they're engaging, they care enough to come and engage with you, so you get to engage with them, and it doesn't mean you always agree with them. I mean, my only rule is if I disagree with something, I generally will like say it. So I've gotten into debates, but I think people appreciate it. I mean, but I feel like you know, and that's been interestingly, especially I have a cup. I'm a feminist playwright, so I have a like the Me Too movement is big in my work, Me Too situations, and people really want to engage on that stuff, and sometimes it can be quite they have strong opinions, and I feel like it's my job to engage with that, and it's my job to engage in like civil debate, and I find that interesting. So I kind of like it.
And
But
so,
I'm a noted sicko.
yeah, so I remember, Bob, you'll recall when we did the first reading of Possessing Harriet, and Bob moderated the talk back, and I had emailed him, I think, or texted you a list of like rules. You remember this, Bob?
I do.
And what did you do with those rules? Do you remember?
No, I hope I did the right thing. What did I do? With
He opened his phone and read them to the and he read them to the audience. Like, okay, so these are Kyle's rules of engagement.
well, because I think there was more than a couple. So I just had to lay out the ground rules.
Yeah, lay on the ground. But Bob was an extraordinarily good and gracious and protective moderator, and I think that's important, actually, because the work can be very tender. And you're at different, some of you're at different phases of the creative process, but it can be. I think that. So this question really is helping me to formulate, because I will be moderating your talkbacks, and I will be in conversation with each of you offline to really think about, okay, so like, what are the rules, right? But Kate, to your point, you said the debate that you enjoy that. Is that sort of intellectual enjoyment, or is it helpful to the process of writing the play?
I don't know if it's helpful to the process of writing the play. I'm pretty good at, for whatever reason, ignoring things that I don't like, I'm pretty good at like ignoring things that I don't think will be helpful. So I just feel like it's more like I was in debate club in school. So I'm like, oh yeah. And like my family is all lawyers, so I'm sort of into like arguing things in a civil way. Yeah, so it tends to not be so helpful, but I'm also sort of a verbal processor. I think out loud. So occasionally I'll get somewhere, or occasionally someone will say something about their experience of it. But as Evan was saying, the this is how I would rewrite it is not helpful, but this is how I experienced it is sometimes very, very interesting, because sometimes people have experiences that you would never anticipate, and that's good to know.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Chesney, hello. I'm interested in having our those who would join us hear about what was your process with last week when you were sort of making this work and capturing this work, working with Faye. Where did you start? Any revisions? What was that process like?
Oh, yeah, certainly lots of revisions. We started with the idea that, we wanted to think about what connects us, right? What connects us. And I said I really wanted to write something about Flint. And I wanted to be able to tell a story about Flint that didn't necessarily focus on, that that wasn't like, oh, here's this political issue, right? Instead, I wanted to focus on being like like a folk tale, a children's story, about a young girl, who is a survivor, right? And so we went through a lot of different ideas because and one of the ideas that really struck me specifically with Flint is the after effects, of what happens with lead poisoning. I spent, I say a good maybe 10 years working with students with different abilities, not necessarily lead, but, blindness, deaf, these young people with multiple challenges. And so one of the things that really hit me about this is what's taken from them, with this lead, thing, and what happened in Flint, and the challenges that they would be going, what they would experience later from the after effects. I had somewhat of an idea of what that's like, in terms of like witnessing that, witnessing what the challenges these kids are going through. And so I wanted to craft a story, which we're still developing it, but one that that saw them, and that would hopefully be a sense of hope, but also a fairy tale and a lesson. Because one of the things about it's not just about Flint, it's about the water crisis that we're experiencing in general. I mean, we were kind of talking about this in one of our conversations, with climate change. It's and kind of like these various ecological disasters that we have being created. I felt like I really wanted to create a story that was a fantasy, but also steeped in reality, that looked at this issue politically in a way that could be a lesson, and something that could make us think differently about these people, these children who are living there. Because I think it's really we when we look at Black and brown bodies, we can easily see them in this one idea, right? And I wanted to kind of flip that on its head, in a sense, and kind of create what I hope is a beautiful story about growth. And so, which I don't want to spoil the story, right? Because I would definitely want people to go check it out. But the thing that I loved about this opportunity, this process, is that it wasn't necessarily focused on the whole, let's make a production. It was really focused on, let's actually create something. And so we're in those kind of bare bones stages, but I feel so excited about it. And then working with Faye, Faye is pretty much like a musical genius. She's got her doctorates of music from the Peabody Institute. Just a really, really, really brilliant musical mind. And so we really kind of, step by step, piece by piece, really tried to figure out, how do we fit this in this form, right? How do we do readers theater? How can we fit it into this particular format and have it be entertaining and also have structure? And we did a lot of like research. So a lot of this time was spent like researching and really beginning to understand how do we fit this real serious issue of essentially the death of birth and the death of the human species inside of an allegory that is funny, inside of an allegory that is telling us a life story. So yeah, it was a great challenge.
So all the work is really exciting to have. And I just want to remind those who have joined us that if you have questions, please put those in the Q&A or in the chat. And as I said before, the genesis, the idea behind Colby was one about, space and time, to work with an idea, to bring that idea to Cold Read, kind of wherever it was, or wherever it is for you. I guess the question is, what do you hope through some of these conversations and the conversations to come, with the talkbacks that will follow, the live talkbacks that will follow, the streaming days of each of your works, and the process that you had last week? Like, what's the big thing you've taken away? What do you hope to take away from this experience, Cold Read?
Did everybody? Is this me?
Sure. We'll start with you. We'll go with you.
Anybody? Oh, okay. Like for me, this has really sparked probably the most exciting project that I've really been a part of or thought about crafting in a while, and I wanted to thank you personally for that. Because this really provided the space for Faye and I to create something that we really feel excited about. I think for me, sometimes, when as you listen to me kind of ramble about some things, like I tend to get into these real social, political, like theater is this activism, and I totally believe that. And this has allowed for me to kind of still think of theater as activism, but to also remember that it's play, right? And how do I make it beautiful? And like when I wrote the song, like there's one song in the piece that is written, and I felt so much joy out of writing this song. And so I've just in the play or outside of the play, I've just loved the process of being able to write something that really felt like magic to me, and to imagine it.
That's great. Thank you. Evan, how about you with this process? What so far, what have you gathered about your play and understanding? I know you talked about it a little bit, and then what do you hope to sort of go away with once you've had the full experience, talkbacks with our audiences?
Yeah, I just I love when people get a chance to just engage with the work. So I think just hearing people's opinions. Sorry, my light just cut off. People's not opinion, but just being able to interact with how people are kind of taking in this story, I think is going to be really valuable for me. And it really hits home because, as I said before, I'm from here. It's a story about Syracuse, and I'm really happy because I was able to not collaborate, but work with a collective here in Syracuse and get working Black actors paid through this opportunity. So thank you, Kyle, for just even having something like this in Syracuse, because I think it's important to just have space and opportunities for all types of artists to get involved in and to make it a living and make it a career. So I think that's what I've taken from it so far. I think moving forward, after the talkback and things are said, I hope that you and Bob and Syracuse Stage and the audience here like it enough to consider it for maybe an onstage production or a different type of workshop where we can do this in person. Just because I just think the story is just so relevant to Syracuse, and it's something that just needs to be told here, and more stories should be coming from here.
And real quick, what's the name, the collective?
Oh, Black Artist Collective. It was just started over the COVID block that we're still in. So yeah.
Right. Fantastic. And Kate, I think we'll close this part of the evening with you. What are your hopes?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've already gotten a lot out of it. I'm very thankful to you all. I I tend to, in order to not stress about readings themselves, I tend to be like, try to focus on the rehearsal process before I get to them. And I have to say, you know, it was really joyous. I really, considering it's a very creepy play with very dark subject matter, we had a great time. And my experience, I've been in Syracuse a bunch of times over the past couple of years, and my experience at Syracuse is always awesome. I always have a great time. Like, it's really joyous. Syracuse does such an amazing job, and credit to all of you that in really trusting artists to sort of explore and create things and empowering them. And this was a great example of that. So I feel like what's going to be interesting for me is hearing hearing how people feel after the play, what they think, but how they feel, and also absorbing it now, because I do feel like in the last, how long was the last year? 20 years was last year. You know, we're in a different world, and we have different perspectives, and I think we're changed. So I'm very interested in any work I wrote before the current moment, how it resonates now. And I don't have an answer for that. I have my own relationship to the work, but I have no control how other people react to it. So it's always sort of like an interesting moment. And also, particular to this play, people know way more about cults. The Vow came up out on Netflix, and that was a big thing, and Wild Wild Country on Netflix. So people know a lot about cults. So it was interesting when I started writing this play, I was sort of trying to hide it was a cult. And now right away, I'm like, the jig is up. The minute she goes into a room and it's a little bit weird, everyone's like, it's a cult, it's a cult. So it's more about unpacking the ways in which she slowly, what she gets out of it, basically. So, because I do think the reason why we have cultish thinking or group think is because we get something out of it. But yeah, it's like why this story, why now, is especially interesting right now.
Wow. Oh, great. Thank you. And I want, we don't have any, there have been no questions put forward because you've all been so sort of engaging and complete in your answers. And I want to thank those folks who have been attending and listening to you guys talk about your work. It's so exciting to have you here. But don't go yet, because there's something I want to do. And I think, and it's meaningful to have Evan here for this as well. So each year, Syracuse Stage holds the Young Playwrights Festival. These are middle school and high school playwrights. They submit their work. Works are chosen, finalists are chosen, and then there are given workshops, and then students in the SU drama department present these kids' works on stage in normal times. That's what would happen, and it'll happen virtually this time. But I'm really happy tonight to name our finalists, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that now, and it's really exciting. And yay, Evan! I know, Evan, I should have you do this. That would be so sort of poetic. But I'm going to do this, and I'm really excited, and I'm going to work very hard to get these names right because it's important. So Morgan Morocco. Yay. Anka Chiarini. Ubuno Oguntola. Mady Phillips. Bowden Bright. Luca Gale. Olivia Davis. And Alan Dale. Those are our Syracuse Stage Young Playwrights for 2021. And who knows, right? They're in that list, the future of the American theater, right? So congratulations to all of them. Thank you to all of you guys for being here, for bringing your great work to Syracuse Stage and the Cold Read Festival. Thank you to those who have tuned in. Thank you, Bob, for being here, for all, and really for supporting new work at Syracuse Stage. It's an honor to work with you and to be here to have this festival again. So with that, I say good evening, be well, join us throughout the week. Please go to SyracuseStage.org, check out the schedule, get your pass for all the events remaining, and we look forward to hearing from you in our live talkbacks on each of the evenings of the streaming days. Until again, good evening and thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys.
Bye, everyone.